Welcome, everyone, to Ovation Presents COVID-19 and Surviving the Aftermath in our community. Wanted to bring together some thought leaders and influencers in our community to really talk about the issues that we're facing with this COVID-19 virus. And more importantly, bring thought leaders and influencers together to start talking about what we can do in the aftermath. What can we do to really get our communities to rebound and progress further. So on the conversation today, four distinguished, soon to be five distinguished panelists in the conversation. I have Dr. Moshe Lewis. Dr. Lewis, please introduce yourself.
Sure. My name, and I'm so grateful to be here, is Dr. Moshe Lewis. I practice medicine in California now going on 15 years. And I see patients from all walks of life, but primarily am now in this new age of COVID doing medicine through telehealth, where I get a lot of questions about COVID and Corona. And we've been trying to go around the country mostly through these types of presentations and get everybody's questions answered, because while I'm licensed in 7 states, we now, under the governor's authority, have the ability to take questions from all over. So I'm delighted to be here today.
Thank you, Doctor. And we also have joining us Ms. Nia Matthews.
Hi, thanks for having me. I am certified life coach, motivational speaker, a real estate entrepreneur, and now a coronavirus survivor. So thank you for having me, Shawn.
Nice. Our pleasure and honor. Also joining us, Attorney Joy White.
Hi, good morning. I'm Joy White, and I am the Vice President of Legal Affairs, General Counsel, and College Secretary for Morehouse College. I've been practicing law for 15 years. And I've been very involved in how the college has responded to the coronavirus in terms of student safety and health. And I also am a mother, and I have 2 sons that I'm now homeschooling as a result of the self-quarantines.
Thank you, Attorney White. And also joining us, my dear friend, Aaron Paxton Arnold.
Thank you for having me, Mr. Crenshaw, former radio personality, media personality, keynote speaker, spoken everywhere from Harvard to USC to Morehouse. I currently have a 17-year-old daughter who has had to miss prom as well as her graduation due to everything that's happening. So it's affected me in that way, and I'm just blessed to be on here with such esteemed people.
Thank you, and I appreciate all of you taking time out of your morning. And so I want to jump right in. Dr. Lewis, you know, you're the Dr. Fauci of our conversation.
Nice.
And I really want you to kind of give us some feedback on what's really going on the front lines. I mean, you from a clinical perspective, talk to us. What's happening with the virus?
Sure, absolutely. Well, I think the medical community feels compelled, and certainly should feel that way, to reach out to our family and friends and loved ones and to our larger, especially because we do have a little bit more time to really try to separate some of the facts from fiction. One of the biggest things that I try to start off with is that it can be very frustrating, annoying, and downright frightening to see medicine evolve. Many of us, although probably no one here on the panel, a little bit older, and that includes only myself, can remember the early days of HIV, which I worked through, where we were still with a lot of questions. We were seeing deaths, and we really didn't know. There was a lot of fear in various communities. We thought we couldn't use, and we said you couldn't kiss this person and you could get it that way. And it took literally months to really begin to figure out a lot about it. There was a lot of hatred that went around and things of that nature. And so many of us may have read about or may remember those type of times. We're seeing similar things today because we know that our news and our media is omnipresent. And as different facts come out or different policies change real time, many people, sometimes from a place of fear or sometimes ignorance, may say, well, that's controversial, or they said they're saying that, or I'm seeing a change. I don't believe that it's true. There must be a conspiracy. So we wanted to use this opportunity to really separate that. Keeping it simple, I think the big focus at this time and the time this is going to come out really focuses around testing. On the front lines, that's what's needed. That's the greatest impetus in terms of getting things up and going in various economies, local, global, and certainly on a national level. And so we're going to continue to hear a lot about that as time goes by. And our greatest message right now, for sure, as most cities and states are dealing with controlled numbers, that word to be politically correct, that people get tested if they have symptoms, that people call their doctors if they want to get tested, and that people find out where and what resources exist to get testing. It is varied, certainly as we go to broadcast, and it will evolve. I've done this in some cities where one can get some testing for free very easily. Other cities, again, non-healthcare workers. Most healthcare workers can get tested through their facility, and all healthcare organizations are making that available widely for their staff. But for those of us that are maybe not in a hospital every day, don't work in a setting that has the testing available, I implore you to, especially if you have a family member or loved one who has any symptoms, that they get in touch with their doctors and medical community. We'll get into it a little bit more later, but also follow up on symptoms that they have.
Understood. And so, you know, it seems as though we're hearing a lot of reports in the news that testing is a big challenge. What are recommendations that you can give to our viewers regarding testing?
Sure. So obviously, you know that sort of before that are the things that we've already put in place and that most people are doing. Keeping it simple, that's washing your hands, that's wearing a mask, and that's having a disinfecting process. And we can go over those a bit, but certainly they've been emphasized a lot. As frequently as one can think of, using simple soap and water to wash your hands really helps to deal with a lot of the things that one may pick up as you come and go, even around your home, but certainly once you're leaving your home and coming back. In terms of wearing a mask, we will continue to see an evolution of those being more and more widely available. Certainly in New York, employers, especially in public transit and things like that, are now mandated to supply those masks. As more and more come online, we'll find that people have them every day and are available. So I think as a society and as a group, certainly as things stand now, we shouldn't be ashamed or upset or frustrated that we're being asked to wear masks. That said, and I know some of our panelists will speak to it, you're seeing a variance because some people simply can't get them or don't have them or have used up the ones that they've had. I know we've had to scramble literally ourselves on the front lines to get them if you're not working at the hospital. I want to be clear, the hospitals have adequate supply, but many of us that go into the community cannot take things from the hospital. Third was the disinfecting process, just really making sure that things are washed. If you're buying fruits and vegetables and produce or many of the items that you bring in, many people are wiping those down. I'll often get asked when we do these roundtables, can I disinfect too much? And I think the answer is no. Cleanliness is close to godliness. Grandmother always taught many of us, and I think really being a little more neurotic is okay. To that point, many doctors and many people coming in from being outside, wherever it may be they may go, put their shoes outside or leave them in an area right outside their door, inside their door, depending on the space you may have, and do a change of clothes there and wash those clothes and go and take a shower before they start interacting with their loved ones or the refrigerator or the kitchen area or things like that. And that's what we're doing, and many people, and I encourage that. And then just finally to wrap up on testing, so I don't overlook that area, many departments of public health do have it available for them. Most of the time the testing is free. Again, we're speaking primarily for the public because healthcare workers can get that on site. Sometimes the lines are longer than if you go to private clinics, which pretty much around the country also have testing available, but there's going to many times be a copay. Some insurances are waiving those copays. So that's things staying sort of as we go to broadcast with respect to testing. We encourage people to get it if they're concerned, but checking with their local public health department where they can go and or their doctor if they're going to get it through a lab because they would need a prescription.
Got it. So testing again is a big piece, and also taking the necessary steps for prevention. But sometimes, even with the best prevention, we still run into situations where people are contracting the virus. Ms. Matthews, you fall in that category. Tell us about your experience. You're a COVID-19 survivor.
Right. I never thought in a million years I would be saying that. Just add that to the list of things that I've endured. But this is a person who's a OCD, very germophobic, had the mask and the gloves on before it was even required. Went to the stores minimally only because I heard about, what they were saying about stay home if you can. But the one time I decided to go to Publix and get my groceries, and I do believe that's when I actually encountered. Then I'm 25 days into this thing. 25 days in, and it's still my reality. Going to the market, buying the groceries, coming home, and this is me wearing a mask. This is me wearing gloves, and I still, we're still clearly we're not going to know where and how I was able to contract it. However, I did, and I'm a pretty healthy person. So day one of me getting my symptoms were not the ordinary symptoms that you see online when a person has COVID-19. I literally just had like upset stomach, diarrhea. I'm like, oh, maybe it's something I ate. So I didn't really panic about anything. That was day one. Day two is when I started to feel like I had the flu. But again, I'm a healthy person, so I really didn't even read into that, thinking maybe, again, it was a bug. Pollen count was high in Atlanta, so maybe it's something in regards to my allergies. But day three is when my life changed because I could not breathe, literally. So I didn't have a fever. I didn't have like the massive headaches and all those symptoms of that nature. It was literally flu-like symptoms. And then day three, I could not breathe. So we called Emory Hospital hotline just to give them my symptoms, and they did not play around with it. They told me that I needed to come in to be checked because I'm having difficulty breathing. So we did the call. They told us to come into the emergency room. They already had my name in the system. I got into the hospital. This was like literally happened, maybe 20 minutes of me calling, and the hospital was down the street from my house. So I get to the hospital. Before they could call my name, I passed out. Couldn't breathe, went straight down, blacked out. I woke up to tubes, to oxygen, to machines, to IVs. They were already admitting me into the hospital. And that was scary right by itself because I had to do this by myself. My husband and my daughter couldn't go in there with me. They had already quarantined them in the waiting room. It was very, very scary. And when I came to, the first thing they asked me was, did I have a living will? And that's when it got real for me. That's when it got real for me. And excuse me if I get choked up, only because this is still my reality right now. I'm still processing this. I'm just getting out of quarantine and to be with my family. But when they admitted me into the hospital, what was really scary is the floor that I was on at Emory Hospital was the COVID-19 floor. Everybody had it. You can hear the coughing through the night. The nurses coming in and out the room with these hazmat uniforms. They had to take them off, put fresh ones on, in and out, in and out, in and out. You can't have visitors. I could barely speak. I'm having oxygen on my, I have oxygen attached to me. My kidney started to fail. Like everything was happening so fast that I didn't have time to catch up. And I'm a very faith-based person, and I'm not gonna lie. You have a moment of, is this it? Is God calling me to glory? Like, why me? All these things go through your mental while you're in this room, and you're in this room by yourself. I even could hear the staff at the hospital saying they were running out of supplies. So to imagine hearing that, along with what you're going through, you're by yourself, it was tough. It was scary, and it was tough. And I can honestly say by day 4 of me being hospitalized, and if you to be faith-based, you got to understand when I say this. When all of my vitals were going down and my body was starting to shut down, I promise you, I felt the presence of God come over my body. And I'm sorry. And I felt the presence of God come over my body, and I felt a relief, like a healing came over me. And that was like 4 a.m. on Wednesday. By 7 a.m. on Thursday morning, the sun came up, my vitals started to change, my blood pressure was up, everything was starting to get normalized. And I then felt healing. So I know some people can't get that, but I'm just going to tell you about Nia Brown Matthews and my deliverance during this whole COVID-19. And so after that happened, I was another day or so, I was in the hospital. They released me to be quarantined for an additional 14 more days. away from my family. And again, that was hard too, but I was just able to be released from being out of home quarantine to now be able to be with my husband and my daughter, who are no symptoms of COVID-19. My daughter and my husband are free, they're asymptomatic, they're good to go, and that's by God's grace.
Sure. Well, that's such a touching story, and we appreciate you sharing that, because this is one of the main reasons we want to be able to bring this to the community. Many times I think it can be hard for people to put a face on it. There may be a celebrity's name that they've heard of, or they can relate to somebody's father who may have passed because their father is older, or cousin, or somebody may be young. But really hearing it from somebody this is scary and very serious. And I think all of us wanted to be able to be here to do this program because we know how important it is for our community to hear it. But when you hear that somebody's really made it through the front lines and been there, and like you said, the public hearing that we didn't have public protective equipment available is not only embarrassing but disappointing, but very real, because that equipment turns over. Many times there wasn't a good enough anticipation of the numbers and where to get it to, and we've certainly seen some of the reasons for that. So we thank you for sharing, because I think it really speaks to not only the power of the Lord and power of prayer, but the fact that people can recover, and we don't feel like those stories get out often enough, so that people understand that, yes, it's definitely scary to look at the numbers of those that may pass, but many people have recovered, and certainly many more people will recover than will pass. So thanks.
Absolutely. Yes. And even just watching it on television, by being in the hospital, I only kept hearing about people dying from it. And like I said, it does affect your mental and even, your faith just a little bit, trying to figure out, again, why am I going through all of this? And like I said, it's still not over. I'm still having a cough. I have an appointment today, a virtual appointment with my doctor, because I'm still having a few symptoms that's still lingering. But day by day, I'm getting better. And as much awareness I can bring to how serious this is, I believe that is why I was, was healed, to tell my story.
Well, Naya, thank you very much. Your experience is truly a testimony, and I think what you experienced definitely needs to be shared, because I think we're finding a lot of people in our community not taking this virus, not taking this pandemic seriously. And so that brings me to Aaron. Aaron, I know you and I have had conversations about the level of importance that our community is displaying. Can you talk to us a little bit about what you're seeing and your feelings about what needs to be done in our community to really get us to avoid the threat that Naya was successfly in overcoming?
Yeah, well, Ms. Matthews, thank you for sharing your story and your testimony, because it definitely, it adds another face to it. It personifies an experience that hopefully most will not have to experience, but it just makes you want to just be that much more vigilant. So thank you for sharing it. I appreciate that. And, like we discussed yesterday, I know for me and just my behavior and the behavior of a lot of people was based off, initially it was a virus that only affected older people. It was a virus that only affected people with pre-existing conditions. So, in my mind, I'm like, all right, I think I'm still relatively young, and to my knowledge, I don't have any pre-existing conditions, so I'm gonna kind of just go about my business as such. I mean, I always wash my hands anyway. I probably took a little bit more precaution than normal, but it wasn't something that concerned me initially. And then as more news started to come out, you start to realize the severity of what was happening. And I know yesterday, like we talked about from a millennial perspective, but I think when you start to kind of section it off based off of whether it's race, creed, or health issues or what have you, that becomes a dangerous narrative that we push, because then you have a group of people that probably aren't listening or paying attention. I mean, I think it's human nature. A lot of times when things don't affect you directly, you kind of tune it out, right? And so this is definitely, Mrs. Matthews just described this as a human issue. This is like probably the greatest equalizer that the world has ever seen. And, like I said, my dad is 71, is, battling leukemia. Thank God he's fine right now. But, I had to get on him being in Chicago about staying home. And it took for Chicago, unfortunately, just to have a massive amount of deaths from COVID for him to kind of just be like, okay, he needs to stay at home. So I just think it's just about education. I just saw a story that actually just crossed my phone where they're saying like the social distancing thing might continue into 2022. I know Ms. White, you talked about yesterday, and this kind of really blew my mind how like you guys are preparing for a fall semester online. Like, you know, my daughter's supposed to start college at FAMU in the fall, and I just can't fathom her having to start her semester here in Atlanta. But that's just how real and how serious it is, you know, to think that, you know, no band, no football, even though those things are probably very frivolous in the scheme of things, but those things that we love so much and cherish so much are, you know, going to be taken away if we don't take this serious. So unfortunately, I think it's gotten to this point where it is so severe that people are beginning to take it serious. And like I told you yesterday, I was in Publix and I still saw, you know, older people with no mask, younger people with masks. I think it depends on a person's preference, but, you know, to the point where you're potentially putting yourself at risk and then going home or being around others, I just think people need to be more vigilant, and the messaging that's put out there just needs to be, you know, more linear, more consistent.
Sure. And I'll chime in there just to continue with the clinical that even though it's basic and we mostly understand it, covering some of the points we brought up before, this is spread through the respiratory droplets. They sort of go out into the air. They then fall to the surfaces. That kind of explains some of the concept of transmission. There have also been, to Mr. Aaron's point, the changing narrative on some of the specifics. We were first saying 6 feet. You're seeing some reports come out now 20 feet if somebody's talking or speaking or you're around it. So that's where that second recommendation, we talked about the first one being washing your hands, of wearing a mask to really protect you, to sort of keep your, or should I be more clarified, it's protecting the public. It keeps your germs to yourself. And so it's easy to transmit unknowingly. You may be asymptomatic. There are many more people that are asymptomatic. So wearing the masks, whatever type of facial covering, is the recommendation throughout the country of whatever it may be, because there is the realization, and certainly we've gone online. I've gone to the stores myself. I've hopped on Amazon. I've tried to do the things that most people would do to get masks, and I've had to go to, you know, sources in the middle of the country and places that people wouldn't normally have access to get masks for our own staff. So definitely being able to get the masks is a challenge. So number one, with the washing your hands. Number two, with the wearing of the masks. But yes, to your point, the fact that this can survive on surfaces for a while makes it a lot more dangerous. And the fact that it goes into the lower part of the lungs, the lower respiratory tract, where people who have pulmonary and underlying heart diseases may be at risk. And it's very virulent, as we know, in terms of its strength. And it's a variant that we haven't seen before. So there's really a tremendous challenge just moving on into time, and why you're seeing some of these hints of longer precautions and stay in place in different ways, because really to get a cure and potentially vaccination, you're talking about at a college or a daycare center or schools, that the teachers themselves really, in an ideal, and I think we could all agree with what we know as of time we're going to broadcast, need to be tested so that they keep their students and or children, our children's children safe, and rolling a standard test out to frontline people across all platforms, from police officers to bus drivers to school teachers to daycare workers to college educators, and all of those of us that interface with the public at a larger level at a stadium or at an amusement park, is really going to be a big challenge. But in the news, you will see these sporadic stories of someone at a store, we won't name the name, that's positive and then felt that they weren't protected from their employer by getting masks because it wasn't mandatory, and or someone else that couldn't get tested and then expose their family. And as you know, just certainly as of yesterday when we went to press, we had 100 deaths of doctors in Italy. So clearly those stories kind of help us in the medical community realize that the safety of physical distancing, we're trying to call it, is definitely going to need to be implemented, even as we, quote unquote, move into opening up the country.
Right. And Dr. Lewis, your comments are a great segue into our conversation with Attorney White. And Mr. Paxton also, Mr. Paxton Arnold also mentioned the issues that we're having regarding school. So Attorney White, talk to us about your experience at Morehouse College and some of the lead-in concerns in shutting down operations.
Sure. So in my role at Morehouse, I am in the senior leadership team. And so, probably 30 days ago, we began preparing to deal with this. And like many others have said in this call or in this presentation, we've had to follow it very closely because it's moving so quickly. And so we started talking about taking as minimal steps as possible. So at first, there was no consideration to close campus or have people work remotely. And in fact, we had made decisions not to do that. And it seems as though every morning, you wake up and then there would be further progression of this. And so the senior leadership team had to meet literally every day, multiple times a day, to make different decisions based on the progression that was happening with the COVID-19. We also worked in conjunction with Clark Atlanta and Spelman and Morehouse School of Medicine, which are all part of the Atlanta University Center, so that we could all be consistent. We are all different schools and we don't have to make the same choices, but we thought certainly with us being in such close proximity, it would be in everyone's best interest to try to make choices together. Our students were out on spring break when it really took a turn. So spring break was the week of like March 13th through the 17th. And while the students were gone, we made a choice to extend spring break by 1 week to first wait and just see what was happening. So we were not ready at that point to close campus. And then it kept moving. And so we had to make a very tough decision as a senior leadership team to have the students not return back to school from spring break. And in making that decision, we had to think about, the safety and health of the students, of our faculty, of our staff, our ability to quarantine effectively. So we're a residential campus where the majority of our students stay in dormitories and residential houses on campus. We worked with the CDC and the local health kind of organizations to figure out if it was reasonable for us to allow students to come back. Do we have an environment where we can quarantine effectively? Or do we have an environment where if one person in the community gets it, that it will probably spread very quickly? And so what we all decided was to take extreme precaution at that time and have students not come back. That, of course, impacts students' housing, their ability to continue their education. For some of our students, their ability to eat. Some of our students have, challenging, home situations. And so we decided to have everyone stay home, not return to campus. But for those of our students that did not have a home to return or did not have an environment that was suitable, we created provisions for them off campus. So we have a hotel essentially that is working with us to house approximately 30 of our students, and we continue to provide food for them. We were blessed to work with Microsoft, who gave us Surface Pros, laptops, internet, hotspots, so that we could support our faculty and our staff and our students to transition into online learning and remote working. Morehouse was not an environment that was necessarily prepared to do remote teaching, remote working. We were much more of an in-person environment. So we had to make a lot of decisions very quickly. But for us, the health and safety of our students first, our faculty, our staff, and then from there, how do we continue their education? How do we make sure that they continue to get what they need as students, and what are our responsibilities to them? And so now we are in a situation where we are remote working and remote teaching. We are looking at it being highly likely that will go into the fall, meaning that we will likely still be a virtual environment in the fall semester. It has a lot of implications financially for the institution. It has a lot of implications for the students, and from having to delay commencement for our graduating students to not having necessarily in-person onboarding for our students, which is a very big part of the Morehouse tradition. New student orientation is where a lot of the things, kind of the indoctrination of sorts, but positive, happens during the first few weeks of school for freshmen. And so those are all things now that we're working on. How can we do that virtually? How can we do as much as possible to still, provide that same level of service to the students, while also protecting the students, their families, faculty, and staff. That has a huge financial impact on the institution. A lot of colleges and universities are having some tough issues because our revenue is tuition. It's certainly our institution. Some larger institutions have research and other things that can allow the colleges to continue. But for small, private, liberal arts institutions, our sole source of revenue, frankly, is tuition and room and board. So for the students being on campus. So those are decisions that we're trying to sort through now, as we prepare for the kind of summer months and the upcoming fall.
Yeah, that you provide great insight in the gravity, and the impact and reach of COVID-19. And so I think some of us may forget how far this really reaches, and some of the decisions and interruptions actually that go into our institutions. So definitely thank you for that insight. One last thing that I like to talk about is just mental health. Each of us just give some suggestions to our viewers on how we can deal with this stressful time.
Sure, I'll go. So I think, from a Morehouse standpoint, we've certainly focused on making our counselors available to our students, because that is something that when you're thinking about a remote campus, you first think about technology and those kind of things, but then immediately you have to shift to what are the services that our students still need, even though they are not on campus. And frankly, counseling support, mental health support, there's an uptick there because you've got students in any number of situations where they're not on campus with us. And so there's just the kind of confusion and fear about what's going on. And then if you have students that have any kind of pre-existing mental health conditions that are not supported at home. So we've focused a lot on trying to make that available to our students and kind of increasing that availability. From a personal standpoint, I have tried to make sure that I get fresh air every day, though I don't necessarily go to the grocery store every day or do other things, but just to literally go outside and do some activities with my children. Try to encourage them to not just stay in their room. I have 15 and 12-year-old sons, and so they are more than happy to spend 15 hours a day in their rooms playing. More than happy to do that. But I understand that ultimately that's not going to be fun anymore. And even if it's just kind of psychologically what that's doing. So there's a balance. I think a lot of people are saying there's positive things about young people being comfortable with talking to their friends online because they're already comfortable doing that. So in some ways, it's not as much of the transition for them as for people who did not do that. But I still think it's important to try to find balance with yourself and trying to slow down, not be, for type A people like myself, take this as an opportunity to slow down, get some rest, reflect, and just kind of do things that balance the whole wellness, kind of overall wellness.
Got it. Naya, how are you handling mental health? I know it's a lot of challenges. Very interested in your perspective.
Yes, and as a life coach, I do believe that this is an opportunity to restore, your mind, body, and your spirit as a whole. Turning off the television, reading a little bit more, meditating, praying, walking, becoming, having a conversation, with whoever, whatever you believe in, right? Just kind of sort of allowing God to restore your body during this process. A lot of anxiety and depression is taking place now, and we're forced to be some things, underlining issues within ourselves. So I think it's very important to get in a quiet place and just meditate and pray and write and journal. This is the perfect time. We've always so busy doing everything and hustling till I die. We don't want to hustle until we die. We want to just live, right? And so that's why just about perspective on how you look at this thing. And I'm seeing families being restored and relationships and marriages. So it's all about perspective. And I think it's very imperative that we tune into that.
Aaron, how are you handling things? How's your spirit?
Man, it's been up and down, to be honest with you, because financially, like, this hit me, immediately, like, really hard. But at the same token, it's my dad always tells me, if you put your problems in the middle of the table, everybody else's, you'll always take yours back. And even though it hit me hard financially, I still have a nice place, and I can still maintain my lifestyle barely. Might have to start stripping or something later, but I'm joking. But no, seriously, like, yeah, I mean, it's just and then having conversations with you, like, you've been, the last 2-3 months, like, you've been instrumental. Sometimes it's about picking up the phone and just having that conversation and gaining perspective, and I think that's just kind of what it is. I'm seeing people who are passing, or relatives that are passing, and they can't even go mourn them in a traditional sense, and so it could just always be worse. And so I tell all my mentees and all my friends, just to, regardless of the challenges, just realize it could always be worse. It could always be more challenging. And so I woke up this morning, today's another day, and just focus on the day and keep it moving and be creative in the process and be productive.
Yeah, I think everybody's hit on some of the key points and things that we would recommend, that we slow down literally and smell the roses, is how grandmother used to say it. As we're doing whatever task, we pick on something even simple to not beat a dead horse, but while we're washing our hands, and we might say a little prayer during that time, or might take a few moments to really kind of feel the soap, feel the water. To Ms. Matthews' point, really taking a moment to just breathe and slow down, deep breathing within meditation, which all of you mentioned in a way, can be so instrumental to just really feel that breath as we're breathing in and out, and having our eyes closed just for a few seconds. It can bring such a calm and such a peace to you in the midst of all the hectic. To her other point, in terms of we are always zipping and zapping, we're all guilty of it. If our bodies aren't going many more hours than we need to, our minds can't be at ease or rest. So I like the recommendations you all made about reading a little bit more. We always say, oh, if I would read this, or I'm going to I've got a good screenplay. Every person, I think, has got a book and a movie and a screenplay in their presence. So maybe you might not be able to rush right out and get it copyrighted and submitted to your favorite movie studio. But by all means, if that's really been a goal and desire, I think all of you are helping to communicate. And then to Ms. White's point about spending some time, really quality time with our family. We face the same type of challenges. I have 2 young ones, and we are trying to do no tech time at the table or when we eat. That's very difficult for, in my case, I have a 12-year-old. But that's been one little simple type of thing. This weekend we just went, outside and just hung out outside because we have a backyard, and just explored that. Again, we hadn't done that in a bit of a while. So little things like that. I did a little gardening, a little weeding, just kind of trying to get into a little bit of nature. And so yes, I encourage all of our listeners and viewers to tell us and give us feedback about things that they're doing that may be innovative, unique. But we all can take a moment, to Mr. Aaron's point, to be grateful to be alive. It's a blessing, and to really take each moment as if it really truly is a treasure, in which to a certain extent we can also honor the memory of those that may have not had a chance to be and see this day.
Thank you, Dr. Lewis. And that definitely are some encouraging words that we all need. And I think even moments like this, just all of us connecting, using technology to connect and check in and share our experiences, that helps my mental health right now. And so I appreciate all of you being a part of this call and a part of this conversation. Before we leave, let our viewers know where they can reach you. Dr. Lewis, how can folks reach out to you?
Sure. So people just look up my name. Luckily, it's unique enough that I'm the only Dr. Moshe Lewis pretty much out there. And so my name is spelled S-H-E, and the last name is Lewis, L-E-W-I-S. Even just that, one can find me. And I take questions, I take emails, I take calls, I take texts. Don't tell my wife. But feel free, whatever may come to mind.
Naya, how can folks reach you?
They can reach me at all my handles on social media is Naya Brown Matthews, and my website soulfood-sessions-with-naya.com.
Aaron.
Just Aaron Paxton Arnold, Aaron Paxton Arnold.
And Miss Joy White.
So my IG is at Joy White, and that's the most direct way to reach me. Otherwise, you can Google, Joy White attorney. That pulls pretty much on all of the other social media handles.
Well, thank you all. I appreciate you being a part of this conversation. This is going to be something special, I think, and let's try to continue these conversations on each of our individual platforms. Thank our viewers, thank our listeners. You can find me at Shawn Crenshaw INC on Instagram, or you can find me Ovation for Men, and also ovationfragrance.com. So thank you very much for joining. As always, it's our duty, our job, our responsibility to provide as much information and as we can to uplift our community. So to the next time, thank you. Every man deserves an ovation. So I applaud each of you, and I'll see you on our next conversation.